How do you follow up an album that not only changes the perception of what you can do with rock music, but also inspires countless musicians and sets a standard for progressive rock as a whole? This was the challenge that was facing the remaining members of King Crimson when they were going in to make their second album, in the wake of Poseidon. So this being the 50th anniversary of the release of the album, I would like to share some thoughts I have about it. The phrase difficult second album could be relevant to this one, at least on the making of side of it. By the end of their North American tour in 1969, Michael Giles and Ian MacDonald had left the band. Greg Lake would shortly leave thereafter to form Emerson, Lake and Palmer. This left just Robert Fripp and Peter Sinfield to follow up in the court of the Crimson King. So in the early months of 1970, they entered the studio to start work. Fripp played guitar on the album, of course, but also the mellotron and various other keyboards that would previously have been done by Ian MacDonald. Sinfield would provide lyrics. Though not alone, however, they had a couple of additional musicians who would help them out. Despite leaving the band, Michael Giles would do drums on this album, and Greg Lake would provide vocals. Picking up the bass on this album was Peter Giles, brother of Michael, who played with Michael Giles and Robert Fripp in the precursor to King Crimson called Giles and Fripp. They were also joined by future King Crimson members, Mel Collins, who played saxes and flutes, and Gordon Haskell, who would do vocals on Cadence and Cascade. Rounding it off for the musician side of things was Keith Tippett, who would provide piano throughout the album. Fripp and Sinfield would be the producers. So, let's get into the album. So the record starts with Peace, a Beginning. Sinfield's lyrics here are beautiful, and Greg Lake's echoing vocals really deliver this. It's a short, serene track that really engages you at the start of this record. It also acts as a sort of calm before the storm moment, which is common on a lot of King Crimson records. This is because it then leads into pictures of the city. This is a powerful track with a hard-hitting jazz sound. It's loud, it's gritty, it's in your face, it's real. Sax and guitar roar here gloriously, and the lyrics here really give you a real sense of this place. The sound of this track is one that King Crimson were very much known for at this time, and to me it's sort of reminiscent of 21st Century Schizoid Man from the previous record. There's even a named instrumental in the middle of this track called 42nd at Treadmill, similar to how Schizoid Man has the Mirrors section. All this makes for a really killer opening for the record. Once this ends, you're then hit with another sharp tonal shift into serene territory once again. The track is Cadence and Cascade, and it's another high point for this record. Gordon Haskell will take over vocal duties for this song. The sound of this track is just an intense, calming feeling. The way Fripp's guitar and Tippett's piano just meld together on this track is just sublime. And with Mel Collins' flute solo, it's just a real piece of beauty. It's also worth mentioning that if you've not heard the Greg Lake version of this song with him on vocals, then that's available on the DGM Live YouTube channel. As well as a great version with 4 singers, that being Greg Lake, Gordon Haskell, Adrian Blue and Jacko Jaksic on the DGM Live channel as well, which they released last year. Following on from that, we then get to the title track of the album, In the Wake of Poseidon. This is an epic piece on this record. With plenty of mellotrons over a smooth groove, this is a typical sound you could expect from King Crimson at the time as well, and it's a sound that's done very well here. But again, this does bring In the Court of the Crimson King back to mind again, and just how it sounds. It sounds very similar to Epitaph, at least for the main part of the song. But don't get me wrong, that's a very strong sound. And this closes out the first side of the record very well. Then we get to what would be side 2 of the record. This opens with Peace, a Theme, the second of the 3 Peace tracks. This one's a beautiful instrumental of the theme, with just Robert Fripp on acoustic guitar. Here's a track where he demonstrates that he's not only a master of the electric guitar, but of the acoustic as well. Again, it does put you in the right headspace for what's about to come on the record. This then leads to another notable track on the record, which is Cat Food. You're greeted with a tasty bass and drum groove from the Giles brothers. Then Keith Tippett's wild piano lines really do catch your attention. You then hear Greg Lake's rhythmic, distorted vocals. As to what he's singing about, I'm not 100% on it, but it sounds like a commentary on like cheap supermarket frozen food, which is quite a departure for the lyrical content they were known for at the time, but hey, it still works, in a tongue-in-cheek sort of way. This was the only song on the record that was made a single. This then prompted the band to appear on Top of the Pops. It's quite unusual to see the members of this transitional lineup on Top of the Pops miming to this tune. And if you know the wider catalogue of King Crimson, you have to appreciate how strange this is to see them on this show. This is the band's only Top of the Pops appearance, and you can still see clips of it online, which is something to check out. And the newer CD versions of the album do include the song as a single. Following this brush with the commercial comes the album's longest piece, The Devil's Triangle. The original intention of the band was to use Holst's Mars the Bringer of War from the Planet Suite, which they had played live for a time before that, but unfortunately they couldn't secure the rights to it, so they had to come up with a composition of their own in that style, and in that sense they succeeded. It's a long instrumental in a very foreboding style. It's full of drawn-out mellotrons and wild experimentation by the band. They even put snippets of The Court of the Crimson King in there, again to call back to the previous record. To be quite honest, I'm not too sure about this track, to be honest. I'm not sure if I like it. For what they were trying to get at, I think it works, but maybe it's just not for me. And don't get me wrong, I love experimental Crimson, but this might just be a little bit too much for my tastes. So after this wonderful cacophony of sound comes the last piece of the record, which is Peace and End. This track blends the elements from Peace a Beginning and Peace a Theme. It draws from Greg Lake's vocals and Fripp's guitar together, ending the record on another serene vibe. So, that's the album. It's definitely a strong second record for the band, and there's some definite fan favourite tracks on there. I wouldn't say it's one of my favourite records by King Crimson, but like all of them, it's good in its own way, and there's some really strong moments on there. I do have to say though, when I'm listening to it, there's a feeling I can't quite shake. That is how much it sounds like In the Court of the Crimson King. Not that that's a bad thing, that's a great record. It's just when you look at all of King Crimson's catalogue, there's a series of radical changes across it that makes a really diverse catalogue on the whole. You really do get a sense of the band's progression when you listen to them all. So keeping these radical changes in mind, it's just sort of unusual just to hear how similar the first two records are. I'd go as far as to say those two are the most similar records in the catalogue, at least for the studio albums. Again, not really a complaint, and considering the time, it's probably the most logical thing to do, sound-wise. But it's unusual considering the radical changes that would come later, say from Lux Tongues in Aspic onward. I think it's also worth mentioning that this material's also had somewhat of a resurgence, at least from the band side. The new lineup of King Crimson brings some of these tracks back to life. So they play Peace, Picture of a City, Cadence and Cascade, Cat Food, which is really cool considering some of these pieces haven't been played live in decades. If you ever get a chance to see the new lineup live or just watch any of their recordings, I'd definitely recommend it. So, overall, very strong album. Happy 50th anniversary in the wake of Poseidon. So what are your thoughts on this album? Please let me know in the comments below, and if you like this video, then please consider giving it a like, perhaps subscribing to the channel and sharing it with anyone else who might be interested. Until next time, thank you for watching.